serious stuff. Good evening. We are learning Maseches Megillah, Daf Chaf Aleph, and we're starting a handful of lines from the bottom of the page, about 7 lines from the bottom of the page on Chaf Amud Beis. We were in the middle of discussing a number of halachos that only apply during daylight hours. Then we'll switch over to things that apply during night hours only, and then we will, in Yirtzeh Hashem, start a new parak. We're going to go until about 5 lines before the bottom of the page on Chaf Aleph Amud Beis. Let's get started. 7-8 lines from the bottom. Chaf Amud Beis. L'smicha u'l'shchita. We know, of course, that for animals, when a korban was brought, that with certain animals, smicha was done, and shchita, of course. Tichsiv. How do we know v'samach and v'shachat? And there's some words missing from the Gemara. It should say right here, iskash smicha l'shchita. That smicha and shchita are compared. Uchsiv ba b'shchita, and by shchita it says biyom zivchachem, during the day. Therefore, we know that it needs to be shechted during the daytime. Uletnufa. We know that we used to take some animals and we would move them around, shaking them up and down. Tichsiv bayom hanifilchem esa omer, bayom in the daytime. Ulehagasha. This had to do with the korban mincha. The iskash l'tnufa. It's compared to a tnufa. How so? That we see that there's a korban mincha and it's hanif and hikriv, and it's in regards to the hagasha, it's similar to the tnufa, and therefore that too can be done during the day. Malika, of course, is where the Kohen takes his nail into the back of the neck of the animal and with accuracy kills the animal. Kmitza, of course, is the grasp of flour. Doing the ktores. And the mechatas, what about all of those? So says the Gemara, b'yom tzavosos b'nei Yisrael, on the day that the Jews were commanded. Obviously, a pasuk being more sweeping than any one of these, and those can be done during the day as well. Hashkayas sota, that the sota, the woman who had to drink the mei sota, who was nechshad for having done something wrong, she violated something with kinyan and stira. She was alone with a man. Says the Gemara, for that we have Gzeira Shava. Says the Gemara, 2 lines from the bottom, Chaf Amud Beis, Asya, Torah. Ksibhacha, here by the Sota, the pasuk says, Vasala Kohenes Kol HaTorah Azos. We need to follow all of these Torahs, all these halachos. Uksibhasam al Pia Torah Asher Yorucha ve'ala Mishpat. What does that pasuk of al Pia Torah Asher Yorucha ve'ala Mishpat have to do with daytime? Says the Gemara at the very top of Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph, Ma Mishpat B'yom. Just like judgments take place only during the daytime, Afkan B'yom, so too by Sota. The hashkoyas sota has to be done during daylight hours. Ul arifas ha'egla, by the mitzvah of egla arufa. How do we know about that one? So it says the Gemara, Amri debe Rav Yanai kapara ksiv be kekachim. It says by the arifas ha'egla has the word kapara, and that puts it in the same class as kachim, and kachim are only during the day. What about ulatara samatzora? 3 lines down, the Torah says zos tieh Torah Samatzora b'yom, taharasa, only during the day, and therefore that has its parameters of daytime. Then the Mishnah shifted over, kol halayla kasher l'ktziras ha'omer. We said that the whole night it's totally permissible for ktziras ha'omer. Damar mar ktziru sfir balayla v'hava bayom. The ktsira and the sfir, those can be done at night, and the hava, the fact that the korban can be brought, can be done during the day, but that does show us that the whole night is viable. What about ulehektar chalav and ve'ivar? And it's well known that a lot of the korbanos that needed to continue to be burnt would be burnt at night. How do we know that night was fine for them? That's very simple. From all of the night until morning, implying that nighttime is the time for hektar chalav and ve'ivar. Then the Mishnah said something that's very strange. Either we gave an exhaustive list or we didn't. But if we gave an exhaustive list, then why say zeh haklal? Zeh haklal, it says davar she mitzvaso bayom kol kasher kol hayom. But it says the Gemara, the question of zeh haklal la'asu yemai. Sometimes when we learn Gemara, we get lost in the habits of Gemara. But this question is very specific. We see it throughout Shas. When it says zeh haklal, what is it coming to imply? Why do we have to assume that it's bringing something extra? So the Gemara here explains, and it's true everywhere, is that whenever it says zeh haklal, it's after having brought a list of items. But if you already brought the list of items, what are you telling me the principle for afterwards? Either tell me the principle and don't tell me the individual details, or give me the individual details, but don't say zeh haklal. Why does it say zeh haklal? It must be therefore that it's coming to include something. Zeh haklal la'asuye mai, la'asuye sidur bazichem v'siluk bazichem. This is the process of adding the lavona, the frankincense, to the lechem haponim, the adding of and the removal of. Uki Rabbi Yossi. The Tanya, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi says, and there's a critical word added here, afilu even silek esayashana shachris, we see there's achadasha arvis ein bekach klum. Even if you take the old one away by shachris, and you don't put the new one up until Ma'ariv, ein bekach klum, there's no halachic problem with that. What was the Gemara hinting to? Is that we know that by the Shulchan we have a language of tamid. Umani makayim lifnei Hashem tamid. What about the frankincense? You took it off in the morning, you don't put it back on until night. What about tamid? So says the Gemara, shelo yehi shulchan below lechem. The din of tamid by the shulchan was a din in the lechem being tamid, not a din in the levona. The levona is its own entity, but the din of lifnei Hashem tamid was about the lechem. So therefore, you can do the siddur bazichin in the morning and the removal in the morning and the siddur at night. Then the Mishnah had continued. We're 6 lines or 7 lines before the new parak. Davar shemitzvasu balayla kasher kol halayla. And in the same way we asked about the daytime, I'll ask here as well. Once you gave me the list of hektar, chalav, and ve'ivrim, you gave me a few things that applied at night. Why then did you go back and give the klal? La'asuye mai. What does that come to include? La'asuye achilas psachim, that the korban pesach can be eaten all night. And this we know famously is subject to a machlokes, udelo kirbalazar ben Azariah. This is already found in the Haggadah itself. The Tanya of achlas abasar balayla hazeh, Omer belazar ben Azariah, nemar kan balayla hazeh, the nemar lahalan ve'avarti be'eretz Mitzrayim balayla hazeh, ma lahalan on chatzos, avkan on chatzos, or belazar ben Azariah was of the opinion that the korban pesach had to be eaten before chatzos. That's why some are makbid to try and finish their matzah before chatzos. They should also be makbid, or at least conceptually be makbid, so that they can get some sleep and not, be trashed the next day. It's probably a good idea to get some sleep. By the Frim ones, Rabbi Tarfon and company, they stayed up all night. That's Kol Amar Be'Rezim Meshubach. That's beautiful. If you can do it, great. Not all of us stay up that late. I remember in Augusta, Georgia, falling asleep on the floral couch in my grandmother's house. I never made it. Even now I struggle to make it to the end of the Seder. What? No, there was not. Very trusting woman. But if you wronged her, she would let you know. So she was Southern. It's just
no, it wasn't just trusted, because her attitude was only put white trash, put plastic. that was my grandparents.
There you go. Yeah. Now we have the difference between Shmuel Mordechai and Mordechai Shmuel yet again. Hadron Allah Baruch Hashem. We finished another parak in Shas. Yiratzon, we should join back again for this daf in 7.5 years. Halfway down Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph, the new parak begins. The name of this parak is Hakore Omeid. So the halacha is Hakore Megillah. When the person is reading the Megillah, Omeid v'Yoshev, they could stand or they can sit. Famously, we know from Eicha that we always have a scene in our minds of everybody sitting on the floor, including the person leaning. What a rarity. When you think about it out of context, we're so used to it, we don't think about it. But when you think about it from a halachic lens, it's very strange that we sit for the reading of the Megillah Veicha. Says the Mishnah here, Maseches Megillah, not strange at all. And that is how this new parak opens on Chaf Aleph. Says the Gemara, Omed v'Yoshev, either way. Kira echad, you can have one person reading the Megillah, or kira uha shnayim yatsu. You can have 2 people reading at the same time, harmonies. You can do a fifths and thirds. It's going to be beautiful. Even at the same time, Rashi says biyachad. Yeah, even at the same time, right? It says Yachad, the third Rashi in the parak. Kiru Hashnayim Yachad Yatsu. V'lo amrinan ein shnei kolos nishmain ke'echad, which is a kula that we've used in many other spaces. We don't say the Gemara is going to give an answer to this question tonight, so we won't be left with the cliffhanger. But it's a good question. Malkum shenagu levarach yivarach. Where there is a minhag to make a bracha, we should make a bracha. What is that talking about? We'll see in the Gemara. The shalol levarach. If there's a place that has a minhag not to make the bracha, lo yivarech, then they should not make the bracha, whichever the minhag is. It is. We know, of course, shifting gears, that b'sheni v'chamishi that we lane, and as well b'Shabbos b'mincha we lane. One is a takon of Moshe, one is a takon of Ezra, and in both of those cases, weekday lanings, Mondays, Thursdays, and Saturday afternoons, it's koran shlosha. There's 3 aliyahs. The Mishnah continues: Ein pochsen mehem ve'ein musafin alein. You're not allowed to have less than 3 aliyahs, nor can you have any hosafos. Ve'ein maftirin b'navi, and on those lanings there is no navi. Haposeach. This line is enigmatic. We'll get to this tomorrow. And tomorrow's the one who opens and the one who closes in the Torah makes a bracha before and after. We'll deal with the details of that later, and we'll see this line a couple more times in the Mishnah as well. So all of that is Kriyas HaTorah by Mondays, Thursdays, and Shabbos afternoon. The Mishnah continues 6 lines down. That when it comes to Rosh Chodesh and when it comes to Chol HaMoed, then the halacha is that we have 4 aliyahs. In Pochsen Mehem V'Ein There's never less than 3, never more than 3 aliyahs, and there's no haftarah. And here too, the one who opens and closes the Torah, they make a bracha before and after. Last short line, here are the general guidelines. Any day that has musaf, but it's not Yom Tov, so then Korin Arba. We read 4. What day is that? That's Mamish today. Rosh Chodesh today. Even more specific details later. But Yom Tov, if it was Yom Tov as well, then Chamisha. So we see a link between a couple of things: the Korban Musaf, the status of the day, and those two things correlate to the numbers of Aliyahs. Just an interesting math equation that the Mishnah is making right now. So Yom Tov Chamisha, B'Yom Kippurim Shisha. Famously, we know in Yom Kippur there's 6. The only time we have 6 Aliyahs. B'Shabbos Shiva. Now in Pochsin Mehem, you can't have less than all of these numbers on Yom Tov of 4, and on well, it's actually in Yom Musaf She'eno Yom Tov, then there's 4, and on Yom Tov 5, on Yom Kippurim 6, and Shabbos 7. In Pochsin Mehem Aval Mosifin Aleihem. This is what happens at Bar Mitzvahs. Acharon, and you got 14 aliyahs by the time you're done. The Mishnah doesn't give an upper limit. Aval Nusafin Alein, you can add Umaftir and Benavi. We do say Haftorah in those cases, and for the 3rd time today, the one who opens and closes, they make a blessing on this, and we will discuss this later. Rashi says as well, halfway down in the new parak of Rashi, he says, Bigmar Mefarish, this line of Haposech v'Hachosem. All right, that brings us to the Gemara. We had first learned in our Mishnah, the halacha, that by Megillah you can stand or you can sit. Let's discuss that. Tana, the Brisa writes, Masha'ein Kain Batorah. That's true in regards to Megillah. But when it comes to the reading of the Torah, you're not allowed to sit. How do we know? Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Kra, the Torah says, Ve'ata po amod imadi, come stand with me. So that's talking about the receiving of the Torah. Amar Rabbi Abba, commenting on this, Ilmale mikra kasu, if not for the pasuk itself, Yef Shalom, to say that a Kadosh Baruch Hu stood up. The pasuk says, Amod imadi, come stand with me. Kaviyachol, Afa Kadosh Baruch Hu ba'amid. Hashem was standing up also. Like what? I don't know what the shock factor is here, but that's what he seems to say, that there's no way we could have ever said it, that Hashem stood up. We use this as a mode of education called anthropomorphism. We give God human-like qualities, even though God has no physical qualities at all. Charonaf, his nostrils flare. We do this all the time. Hashem spoke. Hashem doesn't have a palate. What? Yeah, it's Elokim, B'yad Chazakav. We do it all the time. So I'm not exactly sure why the Mole, if not for, I don't know, it doesn't seem like such a dramatic line. I think I saw the Tosos was discussing this. No, okay, I didn't learn the whole Tosfos. I don't know. Anyways, the Gemara continues 3 lines into the Gemara lines. Ve'amar Rabbi Abba, minayin leRav shelo yeshev al gabe mita v'yeshana l'talmido al gabe karka. How do we know that a Rav should not sit on a bed, and then the students should then sit on the floor and learn from them? Shenemar, this pasuk, Be'ata po amod imadi. You should stand with me. We should be on a level playing field. So am I allowed to stand and give a shiur to other people? As a classroom teacher, allowed to sit while the kids stand? All the notions of shilas are discussed in poskim. This is quoted in Shulchan Aruch and Yordei Reish Mem Vav. I think Sif Tess, I looked it up a little bit. It's a whole world of halachos that one should know under these circumstances. Of course, it's fine. And we'll see some distinctions even in the Gemara about different modes when it's appropriate to stand and to sit and learn. Tanu Rabbanan, 8 lines from the bottom. Moshe ve'ad Rabban Gamliel, a long stretch of time, from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu until Rabban Gamliel. Lo hayu lemeidin Torah el mu'umad. Oh, such an unbelievable idea. So simple. We don't even think twice about it. Of course, we sit down when we learn. Every morning I sit down and learn. I don't know who thinks to stand up, unless you know yourself and you're David Merzel and you're going to stand because you know the other option is sitting down. So you stand up. Good. So says the Gemara. What? I don't think so. Yeah. It says the Gemara, Mishameis Rabban Gamliel. However, the Yeridas Hadoros began here, and we still consider them to be the greatest of the great. It's so hard for us to even fathom how great they are. Sometimes we think of them as normal people. That's an error. These are not normal people. Rabban Gamliel, remember the stories about the rain, that even the Amoraim still had the capacity to pray in a way where they could twist God's arm and get what they wanted. But from the time that Rabban Gamliel died, Yorad Choli La'olam, then there was an illness that came over the world. What does that mean? I don't know. What's the whole choli thing? I didn't look into it, but Rashi doesn't talk about it. It's a choli, it's an illness. Right. It means there's something wrong with us.
Weakness is one thing.
Let's say you read the Sadoros, I can understand.
Yeah, or a weakness, call it.
Yeah, a rifion. I'm fine. Okay, we don't appreciate the Torah as much, maybe halavai, but the language is very strange. It's a chola. It's a chola. Because you're chola. Yeah, but unfortunately, this started by the times of Rabban Gamliel already, and that's why the Gemara says, quoting the Mishnah, "V'hainu ditznan." This is what the Mishnah writes: "Mishameis Rabban Gamliel batel kavod Torah," that this is no longer considered kavod Torah. I don't know. It's almost like I don't know. Last night I was at a Suda, so Rabbi Ephraim Twersky was there. First of all, he had the most gorgeous Bekish I've ever seen in my life. It was so beautiful. I've talked about it 5 times, right? I can't stop talking about it. It's so beautiful. The second he stood up, everyone in the room, like as if strings attached, we all rose with him. So when we're learning Torah, why don't we stand? So that's what the Gemara says, is that there was a Yerida Sadoros. However, we have a problem with some psukim because not everything is so clear that we should be standing. Says the Gemara, I'll sit at the mountain. Another pasuk says, so which one is it? So Amar Rav, Omed velomed Yoshev v'shona. When you're learning something for the first time, you should stand. But Yoshev v'shona, when you're repeating something, you're doing chazara, then you can sit. Rav Chanina Amar, no. Lo omed velo Yoshev ela shoche. You're not really standing and you're not really sitting. The psukim are meant to teach you to be balanced and to be shoche, to be leaning over as you learn in contrition of some kind, maybe in humility. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, no. Ein yeshiva, when it says yeshiva by this conflict in Psukim, when it says Vayshev Bahar, it doesn't mean sit at all. It's Elalashon Akeva, that I was held up at the mountain. I was stuck there. It doesn't mean anything else in regards to sitting. Shneimar Bateshu Bekadesh Yamim Rabim. I sat there. I was held back for many months, and therefore no raya from the Psukim that there's a conflict, and therefore seemingly he'd say you should stand. Rava Omar, he says a little different. Rakos me'umad v'kashos meyusha. The soft ones are for standing, and the difficult ones are for sitting. Rashi clears up for us what this means. Rashi says, what?
Sounds like shofar.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. That's not what Rashi says here, because he's talking about learning. Rakos dvarim rachim v'nochim sha'adam mahir l'shaman. This is the exercise example. What can you do on the Peloton, right? You're sitting and listening to the Maggid speaks. You could take a seat, no problem. But if you're going to be learning a Daf Gemara, you're learning a shiur be'iyun, and then you need to be.
Which shiur do you think Peloton's mentioned? If you want to take all that.
One.
Yeah.
One. I think one. Oh, this isn't on all Daf. I don't even know. They would charge me to put it on all Daf. They would charge me $100 a month. Well, I'll bring swag on the trip. I'll get you some swag. It'll be great. All right, that's what the Gemara says. Very bottom line, let's continue and learn this very unique din about allowing us to have more than one balkore for the Megillah. We had said in our Mishnah, Kira Echad Kiru Hashnayim Yatsu. That's what the Mishnah says. Let's analyze. Top of Chafal from the base Tana, we have a brisa. Masha'ein Kain Batorah. That's not the way that we would read the Torah. It's only true by Megillah. And here are the details. Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis teach us in a Tosefta and Maseches, Rosh Hashanah. The Tosefta writes, B'Torah, when it comes to reading Torah, Echad Koreh ve'Echad Metargim, that's our standard. We have one person who reads, and where necessary, we don't do this. We probably should, but it would add a long time to davening. I'm just saying we probably need it, because I think that a lot of us, myself included, sometimes I'm like, what does that pasuk mean? What's the basic pshat? So it says the Gemara that back in the day, we know famously one person would be the Baal Koreh and one would be the Metargim, they'd be the translator. What was the rule teaching us to exclude? You're not allowed to have two people doing the translate. Ubinavi, if a person were to be reading a Navi, so then Echad Koreh v'Shnayim Metargim, and the rule is that one can read and two can translate. Ubilvad shlo yu Shnayim Koreh v'Shnayim Metargim, and you're not allowed to have two people read and two people translate. Uvehalel Megillah, this is Arden. Afilu Asara Koren Asara Metargim, and the whole room is reading. Mutter, no problem at all. So my time, the Gemara wants to know, why is it that this is okay? In general, as Rashi highlighted earlier, we have a concern of Trei Kale, Trei Kolos Ein Nishmain. When you have two people singing together, then it's hard to distinguish the voices, so much so that if you have a group of women singing together, or men and women, you are not in violation technically of Kol Isha, because you can't distinguish voices. If you can distinguish voices, it's a problem. It's Pashat, it's just going to be Kol Isha. It's not a debate. One woman singing is Kol Isha. Okay, Shilos B'Slish Bachos, there are discussions, but otherwise we look at that as a problem. So why here does that work? If it's true that it's Trei Kolos Ein Nishmain, then why here are you Yotze? It's as if you didn't hear anything. So it says the Gemara, my time, Keivan Dechaviva Yahave Da'ataihu V'Shame. Ooh. Since you love it, you're going to pull out a voice and you're going to be able to hear. So this is why we don't like the kula of Kirkala Lo by women. Because if one of them has a stellar voice, your brain can pick it out. Our brains know how to do that. You can determine by listening what pitch you want to hear, what key you want to hear, what person you want to hear. And if you can catch them once, you can hold on to their. We do this all the time. It's natural. It's just the way that our brains are made. So that's what the Gemara says over here. The reason why we can be makel by Megillah and by Hallel is because it's chaviva. It's very dear to us, and therefore, even if many readers would be reading at one time, no problem at all. 10 lines down. Makom shenalu nagu levarach yivarach. What was the Mishnah talking about here? So Amar Abaye, let's not be too confused here. Amar Abaye lo shanu elo la'achareha. The one paragraph bracha that we say after the Megillah, that's what we're talking about. That's where it's dependent on your minhag. Ava lefaneha mitzvah levarach. But everyone agrees that the bracha beforehand to read that, everyone agrees that you make a bracha on. So why is that? To Amar Rav Yehuda Marav, I think we've seen this 5 times in Shas. Kol ha-mitzvahs kulan mevarach alein over la'as yasan. Every time we do a mitzvah, with extreme rare exception, every time we do a mitzvah, we make a bracha before we start. The poskim have a whole chakira in regards to bris milah. Do you start cutting during the bracha so that when you finish the bracha, you can instantly finish the cut? Because that's over la'as yasan. The beginning of the cut is not the mitzvah of bris milah. It's the hasara sa'orla. So the poskim are done, and this is, I believe, the stima poskim is that while you're in the middle of the bracha, you should start cutting and time the finishing of your cutting with the end of the bracha. So asher kiddushan b'mitzvah savet yivanu al hamila, and then you finish the cut. Because that way, that's the quickest way to go from over la'as yasan of making the bracha to the completion of the mitzvah. There are still other poskim who say no. The whole Ma'aseh Milah is one thing. It's the beginning of the cut to the end. So you finish the bracha and then start cutting. But an interesting deal. But in general, the rule is like this. So it's over la'as yasan. Says the Gemara, how do we know that the word over means what we think it means? My mashma dehai over lishna de'aktu mehu. How do we know that the word over implies prior to? So a few answers. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak amar Kara, because the pasuk says, "Vayarzach imaz derech hakikar v'yaver sakushi." He passed this kushi. Abai Amar mehacha, from another pasuk, who over lifnehem, he passed before them. He passes before them. All of that is the world of brachos over la'as yasan. Big shilas and poskim. What happens if you forget and you're already doing the mitzvah? Can you still make a bracha? So it depends. If it's the kind of mitzvah that it's a one and done mitzvah and you finished it already, it's episodic, so then you're done. But if you're wearing a talis and tefillin, where every moment that you wear them, you're still yotzei, so then the poskim say that you can kind of move around your tefillin and make a new bracha. You can kind of move your tzitzis around and make a new bracha if you forgot to make a bracha. This happens on Tisha B'Av morning when you don't put on a talis in the morning. You finally, once a year, you have the opportunity to make the bracha of al mitzvah tzitzis. So it's very rare. If you wear a talis, it's very rare. The only time that it ever plays out for me is when I play softball, because I have softball tzitzis so that I don't ruin my nicer tzitzis. So I dive in, I put on my talis, I go home and I change. And then when you put on a new pair of tzitzis, you have to make a new bracha, but you're not making lisat teifbat. Then you have to make a real bracha. So it's also the poskim discuss if you take a shower, if you take a long nap without your tzitzis, what are the thresholds? I remember many years ago, there was a shaila in Makor when it was still in Beis Yitzchak. I wasn't even davening there. I was there once on Simchas Torah, and there was a shaila about someone who took off their talis gadol when they were dancing because it just was flopping all over the place and getting in the way. So they put it down. So you have to make a new bracha when you put it back on. You took it off to be specifically not be wearing your talis gadol. So then these are all shilas, but that's the general rule is over la'as yasan. It says the Gemara a third of the way down. Lefaneha mai mevarech. What is the bracha that is said prior to the reading of the Megillah? Rav Sheshes mi Katriza. Rav Sheshes from the city of Katriza ikla lakamid Rav Ashi. He was in front of Rav Ashi and he was the Baal Koreh. Ubarich Mem Nun Ches Manach. He made 3 brachas. Mem is for Al Mikra Megillah. Nun is Nisim, Asher Asa Nisim Labosenu, and Ches is about Shechiyanu. And Rashi explains the same thing as well. I didn't mark off. Yes, I did mark it off. It's about 12 lines down in the Rashis. And Manach Al Mikra Megillah, Asa Nisim V'Shechiyanu. Manach, a little bit of a strange acronym. The Gemara says, La'achareh mai mevarech. What is the bracha for those who have the minhag? Because as mentioned in our Mishnah, it depends if you have the minhag. So for those who have the minhag to make a bracha afterwards, what is the bracha? The bracha is Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. Hakel in parentheses, ironically, still in parentheses in the siddur. Not everybody says it, but it's discussed here, and you can look in the Mar Makomos here. Slightly different order than our bracha. Baruch atah Hashem, Hanifra l'Yisrael mikol tzarehem. That's what version number 1. But Rava Amar that after the Baruch atah Hashem at the end, it should say Hakel HaMoshiach. So Amar Rav Papa, let's blend the two. What? He's a peacemaker. He does this all the time in Shas. Yeah, this is his role. I was thinking, and I forgot about that. Yeah, but it's halachically interesting to be the blender of shitas. It's very strange to say, you're right and you're right and you're both right. That's not. It's a
bracha. I mean, the other example is actually Yaksa.
Right.
Rav Papa says
right
the same exact thing.
Yeah.
But again, it's everybody.
It's halachically interesting.
Now. It's nice to keep the peace, but everybody's going to make a bracha now that.
Well, the Baruch atah Hashem is already happening. The question is, what other words are you putting in?
If the halacha is like the second one,
so then it should be a hefsek of some kind. It's not simple.
One of the things I saw that doesn't seem to be addressed is like the Yom Nerorim when they do a Torah Smedorim. Is there? Aren't there supposed to be three people?
A bezdin of some kind, but like regular Jews, just us. But that doesn't. There's no bezdin anyways. This is just a question of the brachas of the Megillah. But yes, Rav Papa is the peacemaker. Hilkach Nemin Tarbar Baruch atah Hashem Hanifra liYisrael mikol tzarem Hakel HaMoshiach. We paskin like him. This is what the bracha looks like in the siddur. The text is almost identical. The Hakel is still in parentheses, but Hanifra lanu mitzarenu is placed slightly differently. All right, let's get into some Hilchos Kriyas Torah. B'sheni u'b'chamishi, landing on Monday, Thursdays, and b'Shabbos b'mincha koren shlosha. Hani shlosha keneged me. Why 3? Why did we come up with the number 3? A few answers. Amar Abasi keneged Torah Nevi'im Uksuvim, to remember that we have 3 books as part of the canon. Rava Amar keneged Kohanim Levim Yisraelim, and that of course would be a very, very clear role that plays into the who gets Kohen, who gets Levi, and who gets Yisrael. But as we'll see in tomorrow's daf, that's not so simple, because there were times that some of the great rabbis would get the Kohen Aliyah, even though they were not Kohanim. So says the Gemara, fine, I got you by the 3. I hear that you're saying that there should be 3 people, but I also know that there is halacha that we're not supposed to say less than 10 psukim. And Vaidaber Hashem min haminyan, Vaidaber Ola min haminyan. What is this talking about? Vaidaber Ola min haminyan. Rashi, all the way back up at the top, right next to the Manach Rashi, about 13, 14 lines down. Rashi, Dibur Maschel, Vaidaber Ola min haminyan, Vaidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, Afal pi she'ein lilmon mimenu klum. Does that pasuk count tomorrow morning? Does that pasuk count as a pasuk? We learn nothing from it. It's mi amar lemi. It tells us who says what to who. We learn 0 halachos from it, which is interesting, because the havamin of the Gemara is that if there's nothing that we learn from a pasuk, it's not a pasuk, even though it's there. But for the purposes of laning, it doesn't count as a pasuk. So when you're looking at an aliyah that needs a minimum of 3 psukim, does Vaidaber count? So our Gemara says, yes, it does. First of the middle width lines, the Vaidaber is Ola min haminyan. So again, Hani Asara keneged me. How is it that we determine that there should be 10 psukim in a Monday, Thursday, and Shabbos afternoon laning? Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Keneged Asar bat Lanam Shebebeis HaKnesses. These are the 10 Jews who had the sole responsibility of sitting in the Beis Medrash and learning. The world revolves around learning Torah. If there was ever a moment where Torah ceased in the world, the whole world would cease to exist. Rabbi Yosef Amar Keneged Aser Sadibro Shenemru LeMoshe B'Sinai. That no, the 10 is because of the 10 commandments and reflecting that as well. Skipping the parent. I mean, we could read it, I guess. Rabbi Levi Amar Keneged Asar Hilulin Sha'amar David B'Sefer Tehillim. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Keneged Asar Ma'amara Shebohen Nivra Ha'olam. For the 10 words of Vayomer that were stated in the beginning of Chumash, and that's how the world was created. Says the Gemara, Hai Ninu. Which ma'amaros are you talking about? Says the Gemara, the Vayomers in Breshis, Vayomer the Breshis. Says the Gemara, if you count, you only find 9. Hani Tishahavu, that's not 10. We asked, how do we know that we're supposed to say 10 psukim? A few answers, but this third one is that, it's because of the 10 ma'amaros in which the world was created. But the psukim don't have 10 omars; they have 9 omars. So says the Gemara, don't worry, the word Bereshis counts. Bereshis nami maimaru. Bereshis counts as one of the 10. Tichsiv bidvar Hashem shamayim naasu. With the word of Hashem, the heavens were created. V'ruach piv kol tzivam, and that's what Bereshis bar Elokim. With the word Bereshis, Hashem created, so that word also counts. Okay, then the Gemara has a very interesting line, and let's just focus very briefly on some simple math. 10 doesn't divide evenly into 3. So under the most even of circumstances, it's going to be either 4-3-3, 3-4-3, or 3-3-4, but it's always going to equal 10. So is there a guy who's more chashiv because he got 4 psukim instead of 3? Of course. If you can choose an aliyah, you should choose the aliyah that has more. You can't because it's a weekday and you're either a Kohen Levi or Yisrael. But let's see what the Gemara has to say about that. We're about 15 lines or so from the bottom, almost done. Says the Gemara, Amar Rava Rishon Shekara Arba Meshubach. If the person who is Rishon, let's call it the Kohen Aliyah, he's able to get the 4 psukim instead of the others who get 3, that's good. Sheni Shekara Arba Meshubach. And if the second guy gets it, he's the lucky one. And Shlishi Shekara Arba Meshubach, let's go through all of them and see how it is that each of them would be blessed. Rishon Shekara Arba Meshubach, really the first guy should get 4 psukim. Titnan B'shalosh Kupos. This is from Maseches Shkalim. This should ring a bell, or it should ring feelings of some kind. That we know that there were 3 baskets that people would give their chatzi shekel to. That we alphabet. I was just about to say we don't know what language it was in. Was it in English? Was it in Alpha, Beta, Gamma? We don't know exactly what was on there, and we use the money in order. It's always better to do the mitzvah with the first. So because it's possible that you can have 4 psukim in the beginning, wherever possible, great, take care of that. Let the person who has Rishon has. It says the Gemara not so simple. The second aliyah may be the beneficiary as well. The first of the very long lines, the middle one, Shekara Ba'arba Meshubach, he's praiseworthy as well. The Tanya Mupnei Menorah Ya'iru. We know from Baal Oscha, in regards to the menorah, that the middle candle was unique. Malamed Shemitzadei Pneim Klape Nerma Ravi. That all of the 3 candles on each sides of the menorah would lean inwards toward the middle. Klape Nerma Ravi. The Nerma Ravi Klape Shechina. The Nerma Ravi would be facing a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Obviously, the greatest of all the flames was the middle one. Therefore, the greatest of all the aliyahs should be the middle one. If he gets 4, that's fantastic. Then the Gemara says, what about the guy who gets shlishi? That maybe we should assume that we all were on Malan B'Kodesh. Maybe we should always structure it that the third person should always have 4 psukim. So maybe we should, when we have a chash of a guest, maybe we should give them the tochacha. Maybe we should give them whatever the aliyah is the longest. My brother, his bar mitzvah was Kisavo. He had 68 psukim. It was a huge aliyah. That's massive. Now, we don't give it out. We always give it to the Balkore because we don't want to bring a person up, dafka for Puranos, so we leave it alone. But generally speaking, we should probably look at it the way the Gemara looks at it. Why don't we say we have a chash of a guest? What?
A lot of Torah there.
Yeah. I mean, if it's 1 pasuk difference. So why don't we say that? I don't know. I'm asking. Why don't we say that whenever there's a chash of guest, we should calculate which aliyah is the longest and give him that aliyah? That seemingly would be the best honor. So that's what the Gemara says. Malam Kodesh Moridin, and then Rav Papa Ikla Beknishta da Abi Guvar. Rav Papa was in the Beis HaKnesses in Abi Guvar, the Kara Rishon Arba, and he seems to be that he read. It says Vikara, and he read. Not somebody else. He read Rishon. That's how people used to lane. That's how we should lane, but we're Amaratzim. V'shavche Rav Papa was praiseworthy of such a thing. Or maybe the Balkori read. It's yeah. Then just 2 more lines. Yeah, let's just do 2 more lines. Ein pochsin ve'ein mosifin. You're not allowed to add. You're not allowed to subtract. It has to be only this amount. Says the Gemara, Tana haposech mevarech lefaneha. The person who starts the aliyah makes a bracha. Ve'achosim mevarech la'achareha. Nowadays, the kulu mevarech lefaneu la'achareha. Everybody makes an aliyah on everything. Hainu taima titakinu rabbanon gzerim mishum hanechnasin mishum hayotzim. We're always concerned that there should be a person who makes bracha before and at the end, because otherwise there could be a confusion about what happened when someone walks in late. If he walks in late, does it mean the guy didn't make a bracha? He can make an implication that's incorrect. Maybe the first guy didn't make a bracha, and if you're Yotze, you had to leave before landing was over. Maybe you don't know if there's a bracha made by Chasima. We don't know if the bracha was made at the end. So because of the Nechnasim and the Yotzim, therefore we make a bracha on all of them. We'll stop right here. Yirtzeh Hashem will pick up tomorrow night at the very bottom of Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph to learn Daf Chaf Beis. Wishing you all a beautiful night.